Please make sure to like this video and subscribe. Hey, what's up everybody? Jonathan Ross here again from Catholic in a Car. I wanted to come on tonight and make a little video talking about the differences between the Fraternity of St. Peter and the Society of St. Pius X. Now, as many of you know, anybody that's been following my channel for a while, I've talked about these issues before, and predominantly what I was talking about was the issues surrounding Mass attendance at the Society of St. Pius X and whether or not they're schismatic. But that's not really the focus of this video. What I wanted to talk about tonight was some of the practical differences between the Fraternity of St. Peter and the Society of St. Pius X. And these are all based on my experiences because of course I've heard from other people in other parts of North America about what they find different between the two fraternities, but I'm going to limit it to my experience. Now, my experience going back, to start off, I had attended one diocesan Mass, and I kind of fell in love with the traditional Latin Mass. And the opportunity at the time had led me to moving to a certain town in Ontario where they had a Society of St. Pius X chapel. So I began attending Mass infrequently at a Society of St. Pius X chapel, and at the time, they just had a little school chapel. They ran a school, but they didn't actually have a parish. Since then, since that time that I've been attending there, they managed to buy a Lutheran church, and that's what they use for their Sunday Mass. But at the time, and still today, I think that they use the school chapel because they have quite a robust school there. I think somewhere around 100 students. And to this day, I've never found a Mass equal to it. The beauty of it, the togetherness, I guess you would say, of worshiping in this small little chapel and seeing the beauty of the traditional Latin Mass. And the priest there at the time, he was very good, and I got to know him a little bit and had a few conversations with him. And it was just something spectacular, and I'm sure it's still beautiful today inside of the parish that they bought from the Lutherans, but to this day I've never found anything that quite equaled it. Now, that happened primarily between the years of 2011 and 2014. And of course, we were under mostly the pontificate of Benedict XVI, so that does play a part in my experience. Now, fast forward a little bit, and a few years later, I found myself in a place where the closest chapel or closest parish was a Fraternity of St. Peter parish. And that occurred during the current pontificate under Francis. So, I mean, that does play a little bit into my experience, because what I found was the Fraternity of St. Peter priest, at least in this particular location, actually was more outspoken against modern errors and modernism and some of the issues coming from the Vatican than the Society of St. Pius X was. Now, that's just my experience. Now, most people would think that it would be exactly the opposite. And that's often a criticism of the Society of St. Pius X, is that it's always talking about modern errors, but never really focusing on spirituality. And I've actually found just the opposite. Now, because of my work schedule, I don't always go to this Fraternity of St. Peter Chapel. My attendance there is rather sporadic, I guess you would say. And same way when I lived near the Society of St. Pius X chapel. But I did find that the Society of St. Pius X priests, at least in these locations, happened to be a little more focused on the inward spirituality, whereas the fraternity wasn't. And that's just my take on things. I'm sure people that go to both of these parishes would maybe disagree with me. And it's a limited sample size, obviously. But that's what I experienced. And it's funny, interesting, because when I had a conversation with Father Peter Scott, who was the priest at this chapel at the time, and he was also the principal of the parish as well, or of the school as well, he was telling me something interesting, and I had mentioned to him about ever since 2007, when Pope Benedict XVI released Summorum Pontificum, the diocesan Latin Masses, obviously they increased in size and number after that document came out. But Father Peter Scott at the Society actually said that there was no better advertising for the Society of St. Pius X than the indult masses. And I found that interesting. But what you saw in practice, and I noticed this a few times, I went to a country parish a couple of times where somebody that you may all know, Father Paul Nicholson, said Mass every Sunday, I believe it was, in the traditional rite. And Father Peter Scott said that there was no better advertising for the society than that Mass, and other Masses like it. And oftentimes what you ended up seeing was some of those people that went to the diocesan Masses ended up going over to the Society of St. Pius X Masses during weekdays or holy days of obligation, or whenever there wasn't an available diocesan Tridentine Mass. So at a practical level, many of the people, they don't see the difference either, and they're certainly not scared of staying away from the Society of St. Pius X. Unfortunately, you see a lot of polemics on both sides, though. And sometimes, regrettably, it's started by the clergy themselves. And then there's parishioners that feel passionate about the issue on both sides. I've had experiences where people from the Society of St. Pius X, at one time I was interested in this young lady in the United States, and her parents basically disagreed with me going to the Fraternity of St. Peter Masses. Now, I've also heard on the other side, people at the Fraternity of St. Peter using all of the cliche arguments, saying that the Society of St. Pius X, their sacraments are invalid, which obviously is not the case now since Francis came out and gave them faculties. But at that time, they were saying, there are some of the people that I've met have said, well, their sacraments are invalid and you should not attend there. I've never felt that way. I've tried not to stick myself into the politics of the whole situation. I, at times, would go to both chapels. So, I mean, I don't hold that position. I don't believe that you're being disobedient to the Pope by attending a Society of St. Pius X Mass. And Ecclesia Dei has come out many years ago now, but came out and confirmed exactly what I'm saying. So my advice would be to many people out there, what prompted me bringing up this issue was an article published by Louis Verrocchio in response to Father Bizig's, who's the former Superior General of the Fraternity of St. Peter. He responded to a couple of questions, and then Louis Verrocchio came out with an article giving a rebuttal to that. And you saw a lot of passion in the Facebook comments as I was following this thread on both sides, and oftentimes it ends up devolving into a shouting match on both sides. My advice to people would be this. If you go to the Fraternity of St. Peter, if that's the parish that's closest to you, if that's what you're able to get to, then go to it and live out your Catholic faith the best you can. If the only traditional Mass that you can get to is the Society of St. Pius X, go to that and live out your Catholic faith that way. In practical matters, you're not going to see much of a difference between the two of them. And that's my experience of it anyway. The people on both sides are committed to living out their spirituality and their Catholic faith. And you can grow by leaps and bounds at both of these parishes, in my opinion. That's how I'm weighing in on the matter, and that's all for now.